Good morning, everybody. How are you guys this morning? Before we get started, including the online people, who here you might actually think you want to be a web application penetration tester for a living? Anybody? Not you, Bill.
I get to work from home and it pays well.
And it does pay. And I'll tell you guys, I changed jobs when I was 56 to doing this. And, it's not a bad gig. You work from home and you can make decent money at it. And, it's going to be more and more in demand. Now, there's a little worry about the future for what AI is going to do to the industry. But, I'm not super worried about that. I'll tell you why. What I do is I'm a dynamic security auditor. That's a big fancy title for basically I audit websites. So you think about what an auditor does. An auditor looks through records and issues findings based on, so I don't ever really actually exploit anything. I just review people's websites and say, hey, this is broke, this is broke, this is broke. You need to fix this, this, and this. And it's up to the customer whether they do that or not. Now, if you think about that, well, what's going to happen when we switch to AI? Well, I already have a scanner that I run against the website, right? So what I do primarily is I review the findings from the scanner to see if they're right or not. Now we do some manual testing as well if the customer pays for that. But even if we had an AI doing the scanning, a person still has to review the AI findings and help the AI create the report. That's number one reason not to worry about it. Number two reason is we have a lot of federal clients. And if you think about how the AI works, it learns by what it does. So if it scans Marshal's site, it remembers, hey, Marshal was doing it this way, and it puts that into its database. You think the federal customers are going to want that? No. I can already tell you no. So anyway, this is me. My name's Matthew Perry. Not that one, fortunately. I started out my career at IBM in the 80s as a programmer and software installer. Then I worked at the Kanawha County Sheriff's Department for 9 years. I worked at the Masters Law Firm for 21 years as a detective and a network administrator, paralegal. The company I work for now is called OpenText. It's a big company out of Canada, about 30,000 employees. The little part of the company that I work for is called Fortify on Demand. It was started probably 15 years ago in Atlanta, and then it got bought by HP, and then it got bought by Micro Focus, and then they got bought by OpenText. So there's about 150 people work for Fortify on Demand. And I'm also a licensed minister. I helped to run a security conference in Charleston that Bill and I founded 15 years ago called SecureWV.
Years ago?
Well, this is SecureWV 15.
I said 50 years
ago. Oh, no, 15 years. 15 years, yeah. So anyway, in October this year, I'd like all you guys to come to our conference, use student ticket discount, blah, blah, blah. But, anyway, our theme this year is Wild, Weird West Virginia. And we have kind of a cryptid theme. This is a picture of my family. This is the most important person in my family. He just turned 1. Wrote a book about my dad, who was a World War II Korean War combat veteran. That's the name of the book. That's my website if you're interested in that. So today's talk is going to be about web application security testing. And I'm going to start off with a warning. Who here knows who that is? You have to know who that is. You look like you know who that is. Yeah, you. You do not. Okay. Well, next time Bill's lecturing and you get bored, go on YouTube and look up Diamond Dave, the Hillbilly Ninja. And he is famous for, thank Jerry Springer. Okay. So he is famous for his saying, don't go ninjaing nobody that don't need ninjaing. So how that applies to this talk is, don't go burping nobody that don't need burping, because you can get in trouble for just running scans on people's websites that did not contract you to do that, even though you're not technically hacking. Just the act of running the scan itself can crash the website. I had crashed websites before with our scanner because you overload them with traffic. It's basically like you're DDoSing the website. So you can get in trouble for doing this without permission. So where do you practice? Well, there's a lot of places. Portsmouth, Pentester Lab, Hack This Site, Bonehead, Try Hack Me, Juice Shop is a good one. You can install on your own computer and just mess around with it. And then we're going to be using the one that my company created. It's called Zero Web App Security. There's also, now what can you do with this? You know, you can actually make a little money on the side with this, do bug bounties. This is a bug bounty site. You go on there, you look at the stuff, and then you just nose it, because then you would have permission to look at this site because you're participating in the bug bounty program. You sign up for it. So then you can nose around on their site, see what you can find. This is what I do. This is our program. It's called Web Inspect, and this is what its dashboard looks like. So, you know, basically, a customer will hire us to scan their website. They give us the parameters, you know, scan this website. Here's the login credentials. Only scan this part, only scan these ports. And so we set it, go into Web Inspect. It has a million settings. You go in there, you set up all the little settings, and then you point it to the website and just it off. And then it runs, sometimes for a couple of days. And then we audit the results and publish a report. So this is the interface that I spend most of my time looking at. So we'll start off talking about OSINT. And, you know, anytime you're scanning a website, testing a website, it's a good thing to do a little bit of OSINT on the website before you even start. So, and there's a little bit of Google hacking that you can do to help yourself along. So these are a couple of OSINT Google hacking tips. You know, Security Trails has a nice little checklist. SANS has a really cool Google hacking checklist. There's the next one. Here's a Google hacking database. And then, not that I'm necessarily advocating you buy this book, but the gold standard for this, and if you notice the author there, he might know a thing or two about Google hacking, and he's some guy. And then, anyway, this book is, I'm sure if you got a copy, Bill probably even signed for you. I actually did a little bit of work on the book, doing screenshots for help when Bill was doing his part of it. So there's that. So, you know, you can do Google hacking the hard way, which is like this. You just type in stuff in the command line, or you can do it the easy way, which you go to advanced search. If you've never been to that, I encourage you to at least try it out, just mess around with it. But, you know, so we'll put in secret, and then put in our Zero Web App Security site to limit it to, and search for that. And you get the nice little ice fishing guy if you don't get a hit. Well, if you will expand our search a little bit, try it for some stuff like that, you know, because what we're looking for is, you know, anything secret. Now, I'll tell you guys a story. You may think that this is silly, you know, maybe a useless thing to do, but this story kind of bear that out. So we were suing a gas company called EQT. They're headquartered in Pittsburgh. And we were having a discovery dispute about this thing they called a business plan. Now, you know, typically a business plan for a company is, you know, filed when they start out, and we're going to do this, we're going to do this, and this. But for EQT, they did a business plan every year, basically saying this is what we're going to do for the next year. And the lawsuit was about royalties that they weren't paying correctly to gas holders. So we wanted to copy their business plans because it's told in the lawsuit how they were going to, it told in the business plan how they were going to pay their royalty owners royalty for the next year. We thought that was important to us. They said that we couldn't have it because it had trade secrets, company, big secret stuff in it. So we got this big argument with them in court, and the judge ruled in their favor. So I started Google hacking. So Google dorking their website. And I said, you know, it really shouldn't be called Google hacking because you're technically not hacking or breaking into anything. All this stuff, if Google crawled it, it's public on the internet. So I started searching their website, and I looked for, I just put in there where it says Zero Web App Security. I just put in EQT.com, and then up at the top, where it said, or where it says type file type down at the bottom, down at the bottom where it says file type, I did like asterisk TXT. Nothing came up, asterisk docx, nothing came up. But then when I put asterisk PowerPoint, PPTX, guess what came up? One of the business plans from like 3 years ago was orphaned on their website, publicly available. Showed my boss, he got all excited. I proved, showed to him, showed it. How I got to it, there really wasn't any quote unquote hacking involved. He wrote up a motion, filed a motion in court, went to court, sitting there in front of all their lawyers are over here. The two of us are over here. He tells the judge, well, Your Honor, we found one on the internet. The judge asked me to explain how I found it. And as soon as I get done talking, all their lawyers look at me and they just. The judge is okay. You have to turn them all over now. So this is very useful. And it's important for your clients if you're in our case, you want to make sure they haven't orphaned something that they really didn't intend to on their website. So that search there that we type in, you can see at the top how the advanced search kind of encodes it and puts it in the search line. And this is the results from that. Now it's important when you're security application testing to remember that a lot of the stuff you come up with is false positive. So like readme.txt, that was false positive because see what it hit on was where it says password and admin, but that's just a description. That's just text on the site. That didn't mean anything. The error log is where somebody tried to brute force the password on this site, and it's a testing website, so that's what happens. So that didn't mean anything, but the first one on this slide, the admin one, that is a true positive, and if you click on that link, look what comes up. So, cranky, that's bad. And the customer would need to know that. Another tool that we use is called SSLYZE. Anybody familiar with that? Ever heard of it? Know what it does? Nothing. Okay. Well, what this tool does is it scans the certificates and the ciphers that your website allows. So this is what it looks like. It's an old cool DOS command line kind of utility. Now there's a plugin for Burp that you can install. I like doing it this way because I'm old and I used to do things this way a long time ago. But what you're looking at on this screen is like you can see for their testing website, their certificates are bad. That would be a vulnerability. If you're scanning a website and you run this and this. On the next page, you see that these are the ciphers that the website allows. Well, those are bad because all the TLS 1.0s are vulnerable. You really want them to be 1.2 or 1.3s. And then the next thing we would look at is the open SSL stuff. You want to make sure that that is not vulnerable. And then the last thing is the session recognition. We want to make sure that that's not or session recognition. Sorry. All right, on to Burp. Does everybody know what a proxy server is? Bill, what's a proxy server?
It's a server that proxies.
The easiest way to really kind of explain it is this picture. The proxy server is the green thing in the middle. So when you click, instead of it going straight to the website that you clicked on, it goes through something else. So that's the proxy server. There's two fairly popular ones. One's called Burp, one called Zap. I don't use Zap, but they both have their strengths and weaknesses, and they both have free versions. If you're interested in trying out Zap, that's the website, and you can download it there. Burp has two versions. It has a community suite edition that's free, but it does have some limitations. And then it has a pro version that costs $449 a year. So it's a significant investment unless you're doing this for a living and you're making money at it. That's probably a shade too expensive. Does anybody know what Burp stands for? You don't know?
I used to. I kind of forget it. It's kind of like right here.
Gotcha. Bill, do you know what Burp stands for?
It stands for being URL
You know what? Oddly enough, the creator of Burp Suite, David Studdard, said in a company Ask Me Anything video that there's no good reason for the name. He said he was in the habit of writing disposable tools every few days, intended to give them all random names. So the answer is it doesn't stand for anything. He just thought it was funny. I guess he may have had a little gas that day.
I'm kind of afraid why you named the other tools.
Exactly. Hopefully, it's probably a good thing he had the upward mobile gas as opposed to the downward
Yeah.
mobile gas that day, or we would have been talking about something completely different. Here's the difference between Burp Suite Community Edition and Burp Suite Pro Edition. The search function in the Pro Edition is very handy. The scanner in the Pro Edition is very handy. The project files kind of thing's pretty handy. We'll go over some of that stuff in a little bit. The demonstration today will be in the Community Edition. Now, where can you practice burp? Well, Portsmouth has a really cool lab section that you can practice burp. Burp's Try Hack Me has a Burp Suite section that you can mess around with burp. When you go to set up your burp, you have to set up the proxy server. So this is the Firefox one. You set up, everybody know where 127.0.0.1 is. That's your house, that's home. And burp, by default, listens on port 8080. You can change it if you like. So if you set up your proxy, if you're going to use the Firefox browser or Chrome, burp has its own internal browser, which is what we'll be using today. The other thing you have to do when you set up Burp is you have to download its certificate and install it so that it knows that it's okay to run. I won't go into any detail about this, but you can find, if you're setting it up, it's real easy to find instructions on YouTube on how to do this. There's a really cool cheat sheet from Sans that gives you all the control keys and shortcuts for Burp. There's things to be, and this is the exciting part of the talk where we hope that we can do the live demonstration.
We're still online because we're still in games.
Dun, dun, dun. Any questions so far? Career questions, Burp questions, Google hacking questions? All right, when you open Burp up, the first screen that you get is this screen. Now, in the professional edition, you can save your projects, and that's important because, a lot of times these tests take more than a day. But this is the screen where you do that, and you load in stuff, previous work. Now, this screen, the next screen is pretty significant because you can have a configuration file. And you'll see once we get into the setup of Burp that it has thousands of options and all kinds of apps that you can install. So if you're doing a particular type of test, like if you're testing input validation, you may want to have certain Burp add-ons installed. If you're testing authentication validation, you may want to have different apps and plugins installed. So this is the screen where you can set up configuration files and you can automatically load them there, so you don't have to set up everything over and over. Wait while this loads. It needs background music, but it doesn't go. This first screen that comes up is the dashboard screen. If you're not running Burp's internal scanner, you don't really use the dashboard for much. The first thing we're going to go to is the extensions tab. And we're going to go to the BAP store. Now, these are all extensions that people have written and uploaded. This is all open source stuff, and you can write your own extensions if you can code in Python or JavaScript. But there are a whole bunch of these, and unfortunately, some you see here where it says under detail where it says require, and it says require Burp Suite professional. So there's some that you have to have professional to do, and some that you do not. And you can see there are hundreds and hundreds of them. Now you may think, well, why don't I just load a whole bunch? Well, as you're loading these, this little slider bar up here gets further and further across. And what this is your estimated system impact, basically the memory usage that Burp is using up as your test. What these really do as you're crawling the site, they run tests in the background. And so if you have a whole bunch of them loaded up and this gets over to high and it'll turn red, then it'll take forever for you to click and do anything. So you kind of have to be a little judicious about the ones that you add. The next tab we'll look at is the proxy tab. This is where you spend most of your time. The important thing to look at first is you want to make sure that intercept is turned off. Oddly, it's turned on by default. So one of the things, setting changes you may want to make in Burp is turn your intercept off. And what that does and why it's important is when you're in the Burp browser and you click something, if intercept is turned on, it intercepts the click, which means in Burp terms, that means it stops it. So you be clicking stuff in the browser, and well, why isn't this doing anything? Well, that's because you've got intercept turned. So the first thing we're going to do is open the browser. And just a little pro tip, it takes a second to open the browser, and you're tempted to click on it twice. And if you click on it twice, it gives an error. So you click it once, and then you just wait. Questions, comments, queries? Yes, sir.
Go to Zap, OWASP first.
What's that?
I use OWASP.
Uh-huh.
So what would you think the difference is between the two? Burp and Zap.
I've never used that, but I have read about it a little bit. I think that the Zap free version is probably better than the Burp free version. The Burp professional version is better than the Zap.
How much is the?
$449 a year. Yeah, that's Burp. Yeah. Yeah, it's expensive. If you're not doing this for a living, it's probably too expensive for hobbyists. But you know, $449 sounds like a lot of money, but you know, I mean, good grief, we charge a gajillion dollars for a test, you know. So, you know, if you're doing a test for somebody, you can easily charge, you know, one test, you can make that. If you're charging less than that for one test, you're not doing it. So, all right, so we'll go to our site here in the Burp browser. That. All right, the first thing you do when you go to a website that you're going to test is you just mess around a little bit, right? You want to crawl the site. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to log in. Now, if you don't know the login, almost all these testing sites, the logins are real easy, and you know you can hover over this little question mark here for Zero Web App, and it tells you what the username and password is. Because you know, keep in mind this is for you to mess around with, not to be secure. So you know, we're going to log in. And then we're just going to click the stuff, right? And you know, this is a simple website, but you know, we're going to click the stuff, and then we're going to go back over here to Burp, and we're going to see what happens. So next we'll go to the Target tab. Now the Target tab is really handy because this is your site tree that we just created. You can see here that this is all the directories and stuff that we just crawled. Now, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to set our scope. For a lot of sites, especially sites that are public on the internet, they have all this Google Analytics stuff, and they may have, you know, it's not uncommon, especially for sites that are partnered with Microsoft, that the login is a different site or a different domain. You know, so if they decide they let their authentication server be run by Microsoft, then that could potentially be out of scope. So first thing we want to do is set our scope, and you do that by right-clicking on the domain and adding the scope. And then you get this pop-up. This pop-up is very important because it determines how the traffic is going to be logged for the rest of your time in Burp. And if you click yes, then it never logs any of the out-of-scope traffic. And I never do that because even though I want to hide the out-of-scope traffic, there may be something occasionally that I need to go back and look at in the out of scope traffic. So I'm going to click no. And then you can right click up here in the filter settings and you want to turn on show only in scope. And then hit apply. And then what that does is if this were a commercial site, it would have eliminated all that Google Analytics stuff from our site tree. It made it a lot easier to look at. So the next thing we want to do is we want to go back over here to the proxy tab. And this is where you spend most of your time, and here in the HTTP history. So this is everywhere that we crawl. You see here, those are all the clicks that we made. So the first thing we want to do is always a good idea to highlight the request and response from the main page. So you do that by right clicking and then go down here to highlight. We'll make it in blue. And the reason this is important is if you're working on a big site, or you're doing this for a whole day on one site, you can have thousands and thousands of lines of traffic in here, and you want to be able to go back and find stuff. Another good one to highlight is the login post. So if we look at this post, you can see here that this is where it submitted our credentials. There's our username, there's our password. We're going to highlight that, give that another color. We'll call that green. And then another good one to highlight, let's go back over here to our browser and let's go back to home. And you can see here what just popped up in the background is the root page after you're logged in. And you notice that's a different root page than before logged in. So this is the authenticated root page. We're going to highlight that because we're going to use that again later. Make that yellow. Okay. Something else that's important about this screen is, even though we set the scope over on the target page, it still doesn't automatically eliminate the out of scope traffic from the HTTP history. So we want to go in and we want to apply our scope settings to that. That way it trims down the number of lines in our HTTP history. You don't have thousands and thousands. Question so far? Anything else? Okay. The next thing we'll do is go back over here to intercept, and what we're going to do is we'll intercept some traffic, and we'll see what we can do with that. So let's go back to the bank, and let's pay a bill. So let's pay our cell phone bill to Sprint out of our savings account. Let's send them $100. And what is today? The 8th? Yeah. All right. Now we're going to go over here. We know that there's so that's how it looks when you pay a bill on this site. So let's go over to HTTP history and you'll see what it did. Well, see, here's a post that it actually sent the payment. Let's do the same thing again, but this time, let's intercept the traffic. So we're going to turn intercept on, go back over here, and we'll put in $100. And we'll put today's date, and we'll put test 2. And then we'll click pay. And then you notice this intercept screen popped up. So this is the post that the website is trying to send. Burp stopped it from going through. So let's mess with it. Let's change that $100 to minus $100 and see what happens. So after you change it, you hit forward, and then you hit forward again, and you see that it went. And so let's go back over to our website and see what happened. Well, look at that. It took it. No error. Well, that's bad. You pay your bill a negative $100. What do you think happens? So that's a finding that you would put in, your report, that, they're not doing input filtering on their amount. And that's kind of a tricky situation because, there's two places that you can do input filtering, and that's why this is important, right? So the first thing we would do is we would test it here, right? So if you can put in minus 100 here for today's date and hit pay. Well, see, it took that too. So there's no input filtering at all, but there's two places to test it. There's the browser input filter. And, you know, some websites you could put in that negative 100 there, and it would come up and say, hey, you can't put in negative 100. You can't pay a negative amount. But if you do the intercept, then you're really bypassing the browser filters and you're testing the backend server to see if it does input filtering as well. And they both have to be there. Otherwise, bad things can happen. Next, let's go back to our HTTP history and let's look at repeater. And this is where you do a lot of your testing. So what we're going to do is we're going to pull up the authenticated home page, and we're going to right click down here in the request, and we're going to go to send to repeater. And then click on the repeater tab, and you'll see here, and the first thing to do when you send a request to a repeater is you send it just to make sure that it still works. Because sometimes you've been working on a site for a while, sometimes your login times out, right? Or your cookie may have expired, or something that your session may have expired. So you send it to make sure you're still logged in. We got a 200, so we're still good. And then you can mess with it, right? You can do all kinds of stuff. Another important thing, another important tip is if you right click on this little tab up here, you can rename the tab. So let's say this one we're going to test cross-site scripting, right? So we'll rename the tab to cross-site scripting. And that's important because, you know, in some tests you may have 20 of these across the top. And then later when you're writing your report, you may go back to which one was a cross-site scripting. If you just have them all numbered, you're like, oh, which one was it? I don't know. So it's important to name. All right, another one that is fun to play with, back to proxy. We'll go to the unauthenticated and we will send this to intruder. Intruder is kind of like the mail merge of hacking. And you'll see what I mean by that. So what we're going to do is we're going to look for orphan directories or hidden directories, right? So we're going to add a variable after this slash, and you do that by clicking the parentheses over here twice. And then we're going to go over to payloads. Now, you can go out to GitHub and you can get a list of things to try, but in the list, and what you want to do to start with is you want to figure out what kind of website. This is a WordPress website. This is a Drupal website. This is a something else website. And so there's all these lists of, you know, junk directories or hidden directories based on what kind of website that you're testing that you can plug into this. For our purposes, we're just going to hand add in a few here just so that you can see how this works. Oops. Let's see that twice. Okay. So we'll add those in, and then we're going to start the attack. So what Intruder is going to do is, now you get this little warning in the Community Edition that says, hey, you're running the Community Edition, we throttle this back. This is one of the differences between Community and Pro. In the Pro Edition, you can run a list of a couple thousand, it's just right through. But in the Community Edition, it goes, we're just doing 4, so no big deal. So this is our results screen. So based on this results screen, which one of these do you think is suspicious and we should look at? Anybody?
Look at Bill.
Bill? What's the response code on Bill? You guys familiar with status? I mean, everybody knows status codes and familiar with that. So 200 good, 300 redirect, 400 error message, right? Okay, so you'll notice that test, test2, and Bill all return 404s. But look at admin. Admin returned a 300, right? So, and then you can click on these and you can see the request response, right? So 302 found. Oh, well, look at that. We found admin. 404 not found. So we don't care about these, but we do maybe want to go look at that. Right, so we'll go over here to our browser. And this is one way to do it. You just hand put it in, see what comes up. Wow, my goodness, look at that. There's the admin page. Zoinks, that's bad. Right, that's a finding. You shouldn't be able to get to that. Unless you're the administrator. We're not, we're just a plain old user. So no, shouldn't be able to get to that. Now let's try and brute force the password. That sounds like fun. So let's go back over here and see we highlighted our login post in green. So we'll go back over here, right click, send to intruder. Now the tabs are the same as they were in repeater, right? So, maybe I should have come up here and rename this tab to directories. And we're going to rename this one to direct click. We're going to rename this one to password. So that way you keep track of your stuff a little better. So what we're going to do here is we're going to go down here to password. And we're going to take that out. And we're going to make it bird. Right now, sometimes the password's encrypted. Of course, it's supposed to be. You should be able to see it there, but this is a testing website, so you can. But we'll go over here to payloads, and we'll put some in. Of course, you can get lists of common passwords from wherever, and now this is an important test because, this number one, the site's not supposed to let you try a million times to log in, right? It's supposed to lock you out. Our audit finding at our company is 10. If you try more than 10 times on the site and it doesn't lock the account out, then that's a finding. Now, the locking the account out is an interesting finding in and of itself. Because, just think if I set this variable up on the username and the password and tested them both against different lists, right? So I did a brute force attack against the username and a whole big long list of passwords. Number one, I'm DDoSing the site. But number two, could I potentially lock out every user? That's bad. That's a different kind of DDoS attack. So what we really want, pass on for our audit where I work is if it locks out the account, but only temporarily for like 10 minutes. That way you can't permanently tank the entire website for everybody. Somebody has to go back in and fix. So let's run this attack and see what happens. So we get our handy pop up again, and then here's our results. Now, based on these results, how can you tell which one was a success? You notice they're all 302s. So it's not the same as the other ones. Now we know the password, so we know that's it. But what's different about it? How can we tell that one's the truth? Exactly. And how we verify that. See, let's look at one of the ones that's wrong, right? So let's look at the response for test. And you'll notice right here, it says log in the location, it says login HTML, login error equals true. But if we look at the one that we know is right, password, then the location actually has a location and it gave us a user token. So on this one, we know that it's right because the length is different. Questions, comments, queries? All right, since we're looking at this user token, let's see what it is. So what we're going to do is we're going to highlight that token and we're going to right click and we're going to go send to decoder. This is like the super secret magic decoder ring that Ralphie gets from, what was the radio show?
I don't know. I think that,
I can't remember.
Those
I'm
little
sure
orphan
you've seen that
ants.
movie in there.
Well, yeah. Watch Christmas Story this next year at Christmas. You'll see Ralph Beginner's decoder right. So anyway, you copy and paste this in the decoder, and then you can just play around with it and see what comes up. You can decode it as URL, you can decode it as HTML, you can decode it as base64. And sometimes there's secret stuff in there that's not supposed to be. Yeah, this is kind of cool. And what else is cool about the decoder is it is actually also an encoder. So sometimes when you're hacking a website, you need to encode stuff and substitute it, put it back in the string. Let's talk about vulnerabilities from it. Let me go minimize that, close that. You can save your intruder attacks if you need to. Minimize that, close that. Let's go back. Oops, let's go back to here. And let's talk about oops. Let's talk about the root page here and what vulnerabilities do you see on this page? Well, first off, in the cookie, you shouldn't have the username and password in plain text, right? And you guys all familiar with the cookie settings? There are 3, right? So it should say secure, does not. It should say HTTP only, which it does, but it also should say same site. Now, what it should not say, this one doesn't, but it should not say a date. You know, if it has it, sometimes cookies have an expiration date. You don't want the expiration date to be too far in the future. Anything in the future is a finding for our company, but you don't want it to be too far into the future. What else is wrong on this page? Well, okay, so same site now. The server name, information disclosure is bad. Hackers can just look at your website and see things. Now, you know, they may be able to say, oh, well, this is Apache Coyote version 1.1. Let's go to GitHub and see what the vulnerabilities are for Apache Coyote 1.1. That heading is redundant, unnecessary, and a vulnerability. Access control, allow origin asterisk. That's bad. So what that means is that you can access this from anywhere. You should only be certain pages of your website. You should only be able to access from other pages of your website. That's part of how you can do cross-site scripting, right? So that asterisk is a finding. That's bad. Content type. Text HTML is a vulnerable content type. You should have something more secure there. Now, the other thing that's important was before I already did. More as important as what's there is what's not there, right? So there should be a content type or a content security policy header. There's not one. There should be a transport security header. There's not one. There should be an X content type options, and that should say no snip. That's not there. There should be this one's hard for me to say, XXSS protection header, and it's not there. So those are all vulnerabilities that we would find. Any other questions? Anything you guys want to try while we're here just hosing around? You want to try and break something?
Why not?
Why not? Exactly. All right, let's go to the search bar on any website is a good place to test stuff, right? So let's go and let's try to put something in. I like to, when I'm testing stuff, I like to have a document open that has all my little handy dandy things. So you just have to copy and paste them in. Number one, I'm old and start to remember stuff. And number two, it just makes it clear. Okay, so what did that just do? And what vulnerability is that? So I put in some HTML code in the search bar and it displayed it on the screen. Is that good or bad? that search bar, let's try this one. That search bar should be filtering, right? And so you should not be allowed to put in stuff like this and it display on the screen, because in theory, it could be an executable. Bad. That's fine. Let's go to, let's see here, I had some. Over it now. Add a pay, figure out where to add a pay. Add a new payee name. Test, payee address. Test. Let's put in cross-site scripting attack. So what this attack right here does is it makes it, if it works, makes an error. Well, not that error, but so obviously that one didn't work. But stuff like that you can try. Let's see, add a new payee. Let's try. Now what's this? If I just do that, what's that going to do? Find out. It breaks out of the, if this site is vulnerable to SQL injection, if you put in just a single tick, then what that does is it breaks out of the code and it allows you to execute SQL. If that works, then you know that the site will allow you to execute SQL. And so let's look at the very last thing that we did, which is this. You see down here at the bottom in the name, that's the encode. %27 is encoded quote. So it didn't work, but those are things like that that you want to mess around with and test. There's a whole list of those, and you learn them all, and then you do the TriAcme stuff or the Burp Suite training stuff. You learn all those. Any other questions? What time do you guys normally get out at 10 till?
10:50.
Okay.
But you're,
10:52.
another class comes in at 11.
Gotcha. Any other questions? I'm basically done. Any other questions? Anybody? Okay, cool. Thank you, guys. Thank you
Yeah.
for participating and putting up with me. So,
Thank you.
oh, you're very welcome. You're very welcome. These are good jobs. If this is what you guys want to do, this is, it's moderately fun because you get, it becomes a little tedious after a while. Because especially when you do, what the tedious thing about my job is we have customers that have us test the same site every month and they never change anything and they never fix anything. That's the tedious, right? But the not tedious part is when you have a customer that actually engages with you and fixes stuff. And then they want you to test what they fixed, right? Those are the good things that we do. So, I'm okay. I'm happy with it. It's a good place to work and it's a good job. So, and you make good money at it. Always a plus. All right, cool. Well, thank you guys.